Hello, everybody, and welcome to History Bite number 325, dated November 13th, 2021. I'm Walter, your mobile historian and blue-collar scholar. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This History Bite is entitled Black History Legends, William H. Hastie, Jr. Before I begin, however, I'd like to formally invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Juarez Lee Shelton, M.A. And in addition to that, please also click on the little notification bell immediately to the right of the subscribe button. In doing so, you will receive notifications when I post new, exciting, and enlightening videos in history, law, political science, theology, and philosophy. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for doing so. You're the best. Again, this video is entitled Black History Legends, William H. Hastie, Jr. William H. Hastie, Jr., 1904 to 1976, is a black history legend and phenomenal American for two powerful reasons. First reason, he was the very first African American to serve as a United States federal judge, serving as a U.S. District Court judge from March 26, 1937 until July 1st, 1939, and a United States Court of Appeals judge from October 21st, 1949 until his death on April 14th, 1976. He was thus the first black person in American history to serve on both of those levels of the United States federal judiciary. No small honor indeed. Second, he was the very first African American to serve as the governor of a United States territory, the Virgin Islands, serving in that role from May 17, 1946 until October 21, 1949. His status as a legend is further augmented with a decorated career as an attorney, civil rights activist, educator, and public servant. William Henry Hastie, Jr. was born in Knoxville, Tennessee on November 17, 1904, to William H. Hastie, Sr. and Roberta Childs. Though he spent his early years in the state of Tennessee, his family would eventually relocate to the nation's capital. In 1921, Hastie graduated from Paul Laurence Dunbar High School in D.C. and attended university at Amherst College in Massachusetts. He graduated first in his class, Phi Beta Kappa, with a Bachelor of Arts degree from Amherst in 1925, and began teaching at the Bordentown Manual School in New Jersey until 1927. It is highly worthy to note that after graduation from Amherst, Hastie had been offered prestigious graduate fellowships at Oxford University in the UK and at the University of Paris in France. He, however, elected to remain local, teaching in New Jersey until enrolling at Harvard Law School in 1927. From Harvard, Hastie would obtain the LL.B. degree in 1930 and returned to Washington, D.C., joining the faculty of Howard University School of Law. In 1931, he was admitted to the District of Columbia Bar and began practicing law alongside his cousin, the legendary Charles Hamilton Houston. Houston, who served as vice dean and dean of Howard Law School, would leave his own formidable footprint in the civil rights arena before his death in 1950. In 1933, Hastie returned to Harvard Law School to obtain his Doctor of Juridical Science degree, which is the law school equivalent of a Ph.D. Also in that year, in gaining the attention of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, Hastie would be appointed as a presidential advisor on race relations and would later receive an appointment as an assistant solicitor for the United States Department of the Interior. In that role, he would serve to advise the department on matters of racial issues. While there, he would also have the distinct honor of drafting a territorial constitution for the United States Virgin Islands, which are located in the West Indies. For sure, Hastie's work had so gained the approbation of the president that in March of 1937, he would appoint him as a judge of the United States District Court for the District of the Virgin Islands. This appointment made William Hastie the the first African American to serve as a federal judge in American history, and by virtue of this, the first African American in any U.S. district court. For those who are unaware, the U.S. district courts are the trial courts of the U.S. federal government. This appointment was not without controversy, as you would imagine, and did indeed draw opposition from many members of the United States Senate. Nonetheless, Hastie was confirmed and served in this honorable role for 2 years before stepping down in July of 1939 to become both dean and professor of law at the Howard University School of Law. Recall that Hastie had previously taught at Howard Law, and one of his students was future attorney and U.S. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. While serving as dean of Howard Law School, Hastie also served as a civilian aide to U.S. Secretary of War Henry Stimson from 1940 to 1943, passionately advocating for the integration of the U.S. Army, equal treatment of black troops, and their ability to serve in non-restricted capacities, just like white troops. He resigned from the War Department in January of 1943 over their refusal to implement any form of racial integration of Army troops, as well as the poor training of black pilots and unequal distribution of work assignments. Hastie returned to full-time duties at Howard Law School and would also that year receive the Spingarn Medal from the NAACP in recognition for his protest. Ironically, Hastie's departure from the War Department would persuade limited immigration programs from the Army and Navy, to take effect. In 1944, he would serve as co-counsel with Thurgood Marshall in arguing the landmark Smith versus Allwright case in the United States Supreme Court. Marshall and Hastie would prevail here big time, with the court siding with them in an 8-1 decision outlawing state-sanctioned white primaries as a violation of both the 14th and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. If you want to check that case out, again, it is Smith versus Allwright, 1944, a case in which Thurgood Marshall remarked was the most important one that he ever argued at the U.S. Supreme Court. Marshall argued 33 cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, winning 29 of them, by the way, out of that 33. Not bad, indeed. In May of 1946, President Harry Truman would appoint Bill Hastie as the governor of the United States Virgin Islands, making him the first ever African-American governor of a U.S. territory. He served in that role with distinction for 3 years until being elevated once more by President Truman to a newly established judgeship on the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit in October of 1949. As the Senate was in recess, Hastie's appointment was known as a recess appointment and therefore initially did not require Senate confirmation. When the Senate reconvened in January of 1950, President Truman formally nominated him for that vacancy, to which Hastie was confirmed on July 19th of that year, and he received his commission on July 22nd, 1950. Hastie's elevation to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals made him the very first African American to ever be appointed to a judgeship on a federal appeals court. All right? Some have argued that Truman considered appointing Hastie to the Supreme Court, but ultimately the president decided against this, feeling there would not be enough support in the Senate or in the public in general for such an appointment at this time. Keep in mind this was 1949, all right? And for the record, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals is based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Judge Hastie would serve on the Third Circuit for nearly the next 27 years, which included an assignment as Chief Judicial Officer from the Third Circuit for the Judicial Conference of the United States from 1968 to 1971, and as a judge of the Temporary Emergency Court of Appeals from 1972 to 1976. That court temporary in function, was specifically designed to hear appeals from the U.S. district courts in cases arising under the Wage and Price Control Program of the Economic Stabilization Act of 1970. Also, the Judicial Conference of the United States, for those who are unaware, is essentially the board of directors for the federal judiciary, establishing rules, procedures, and guidelines for the administration of the federal courts. As the first African American appellate judge, Hastie was considered by President John F. Kennedy as a possible replacement for retiring U.S. Supreme Court Justice Charles Whittaker in 1962. Likely due to political difficulties from Southern senators and other reasons, Kennedy ultimately chose Byron White for the seat. Additionally, many other people of prominence, including Chief Justice Earl Warren, while personally admiring Hastie, felt that he was too conservative for the Supreme Court. Warren stated in regards to Hastie that, quote, "He's not a liberal, and he'll be opposed to all measures we are interested in, and he would be completely unsatisfactory." This wasn't personal, by the way. It was just business. Indeed, outside of civil rights issues, he had developed a relatively moderate to conservative record as a jurist on the Third Circuit, nothing matching the broad leaps that the Warren Court would take further into the 1960s. In spite of these things, Kennedy remarked that he would appoint Hastie to the court another time, something that was, of course, precluded by the president's death in 1963. Ultimately, as we know, the first African-American U.S. Supreme Court justice would be Thurgood Marshall, who was appointed to that position by President Lyndon B. Johnson in June of 1967, taking office in October of that year. Hastie and Marshall had been professor and student, and then friends and colleagues for many years at that point. Marshall was indeed the lion liberal that Chief Justice Warren would embrace in the 2 years that they served together, from 1967 until Warren's retirement in 1969. In May of 1971, at the age of 66, Judge Hastie took senior status on the Third Circuit, which is a form of semi-retirement for federal judges. It allows them to continue to serve, but with a considerably reduced workload if they choose. That status also allows for the President of the United States to appoint a new judge to the seat as a full-time judge for that particular federal court. On April 14, 1976, Judge Hastie passed away at the age of 71 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At the time of his death, he was engaged in a game of golf. He was survived by his wife, Beryl, and his 2 children, a son, William Hastie III, and a daughter, Karen Williams. The legacy of William H. Hastie lives on as a history maker and a crusader for social justice in the United States. Like many prominent and elite African Americans of his day, he used his experiences, education, and indeed, skin color, being a very fair-skinned black man, to fight for the equality of his people, and did so by way of personal activism and shaping the law as a jurist. And I mention, his skin color because I guess it's needless to say that lighter African Americans, and, you don't have to do much research to see this, certainly had a far easier time moving upward in whatever industry or vocation they chose, due to their complexion, Lighter-skinned blacks, were generally viewed by the mainstream white population of the day as, more like them, so to speak, and therefore more desirable to promote, all right? And certainly that had an effect on, the mindset of African Americans, in viewing our skin color as our worth, which of course is very, very shameful and absolutely a totally illogical way of thinking. But I just state that to mention that, Hastie like so many other very, very fair-skinned African Americans of his time, Hastie, Marshall, and many, many others. Certainly, you look at most of them, they were light-skinned African Americans, and thus they were able to more easily and readily have the ear of prominent whites of the day than darker African Americans of the time. Okay, but back to this. So on activism, okay, Hastie remarked that the Negro lawyer has played and continues to play a very important role in the American Negro struggle for equality. All right. So Hastie understood that the law was not a static object that stood aside from the changes in society, but was a living thing which, for better or for worse, had to evolve with society in order to remain functional and obeyed. Indeed, he once remarked that a judge's duty is to, quote, maintain neutrality while giving the best objective judgment of the contest between adversaries, end quote. Judge Hastie also lives on by way of numerous forms of recognition. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the library for the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit bears his name. Additionally, at the Beck Cultural Exchange Center in Knoxville, Tennessee, there is a permanent memorial room in his honor, which houses all of his personal papers. Lastly, there is an urban park in South Knoxville, Tennessee, which is named for Judge Hastie. So, Judge Hastie is indeed a very powerful and prominent African-American history maker, one who unfortunately is not as well known as many of his counterparts, contemporaries of the time, such as, Thurgood Marshall, Charles Hamilton Houston, and many, many others. Roy Wilkins, there are loads of African American individuals who were on the front lines for the cause for equality. And just like with the founding fathers, there are many who were very known for their activism, and others who were known to a far lesser degree. But nonetheless, all of them made an impact, and all of them, deserve recognition. And again, Judge Hastie is certainly not as well known among African Americans as Thurgood Marshall, but believe me, his role in helping to shape the law for the benefit of African American equality was no less influential than that of Thurgood Marshall. All right. So that concludes my video on the Black history legend, Judge William H. Hastie, Jr., 1904 to 1976. If you have any questions or controversies, you can leave them down below, and I will be happy to answer them. If you liked this video, enjoyed it, gained some insight from it, which I certainly hope that you did, please drop me a like. That would be most graciously appreciated. And if you have not subscribed to my video at this point, my page rather, Juarez Lee Shelton, M.A., that would be appreciated more than you will ever know. All subscriptions matter, and I appreciate you very much for watching this entire video, learning something from it, and helping me build my YouTube presence. So, thank you again, everyone. Take care, stay safe out there, and I will talk to you at the next video. Peace.